The Man Who Engineered Control, the story of Ingvar Kamprad. When people look at success, they usually focus on what they can see: revenue numbers, store locations, brand recognition, scale. They look at the surface, but the surface is never the real story. The real story is always hidden in the structure underneath. Ingvar Kamprad didn't become one of the richest men in the world by chasing success. He became wealthy by removing everything that makes success unstable. That difference is subtle, but it changes everything. He was born into a world where nothing was guaranteed. Rural Sweden in the early 20th century was not a place of opportunity. It was a place of limitation. Life was simple, resources were scarce, and inefficiency had consequences. You didn't waste things because you couldn't afford to. This kind of environment doesn't produce dreamers. It produces observers. Kamprad learned early that every decision had a cost, not just financially, but structurally. If you make the wrong decision once, you lose something small. If you repeat it, you lose everything. So instead of thinking about ambition, he developed something far more powerful: awareness. As a child, he wasn't trying to build a company, he was trying to understand patterns. Why do some things sell and others don't? Why do some people profit while others struggle? Why do certain decisions repeat across different situations? He started small: matches, bought cheaply, sold slightly higher, repeated. Then he expanded: pens, household items, seasonal goods. But here's what mattered. He wasn't experimenting randomly. He was refining a process. Every sale was data. Every mistake was feedback. Every small success was confirmation. And over time, that created something dangerous. Not knowledge, not experience, predictability. He began to understand outcomes before they happened. Most people operate reactively. They make decisions and then deal with consequences. Kamprad did the opposite. He built decisions that controlled the outcome in advance. At 17, when he created IKEA, it wasn't the result of inspiration. It was the result of accumulation. Years of observing, testing, refining. At that point, the company was still small, still fragile, still irrelevant in the bigger picture. But the foundation was different. Most businesses start with a product. Kamprad started with a system. And that's why, when he entered the furniture industry, he didn't see opportunity. He saw inefficiency. The entire industry was built on outdated assumptions. Furniture had to be assembled, had to be large, had to be transported in full form, had to involve multiple steps, multiple people, multiple costs. Nobody questioned it, because it worked. But working and optimal are not the same thing. Kamprad didn't try to improve the product. He attacked the structure. Why transport air? Why ship volume instead of components? Why pay for labor the customer could provide themselves? The answers led to one of the most disruptive ideas in modern retail: flat pack furniture. At first, it was misunderstood, criticized, mocked. Customers didn't trust it. Competitors ignored it. But Kamprad wasn't building for approval. He was building for efficiency. And efficiency wins, not immediately, but inevitably. Flat pack reduced costs at every level: production, storage, transport, distribution. Each layer became lighter, faster, cheaper, and when systems improve across all levels, the result compounds. Prices dropped, demand increased, scale expanded, and IKEA began to grow. Not explosively, but steadily, predictably. This is where Kamprad separated himself completely from traditional entrepreneurs. He didn't grow fast, he grew correctly. While others chased expansion, he reinforced structure. While others added complexity, he removed it. While others reacted to problems, he prevented them. Over time, this created something almost impossible to compete with, because competitors were playing a different game. They were optimizing products. Kamprad was optimizing systems, and systems define outcomes. As IKEA expanded internationally, the same principles applied everywhere. Different countries, different cultures, different markets, but the system held. Because it wasn't built on external conditions, it was built on internal logic, efficiency, consistency, control. And here's where the story becomes even more unusual. Because despite building a global empire, Kamprad never transitioned into the lifestyle that usually follows success. There was no transformation, no shift, no arrival. He remained the same, economical, careful, intentional. He avoided unnecessary spending not as a tactic but as a belief. While others used wealth to simplify life, he used discipline to control it. This created alignment between his personal life and his business philosophy. There was no contradiction, no separation. The same thinking applied everywhere. And that's what made it sustainable. Because the biggest weakness in most systems is inconsistency. People change, habits break, decisions drift. Kamprad didn't allow that. He maintained the same mindset from the beginning to the end. And that's why IKEA didn't collapse under its own growth. It adapted, scaled, stabilized. Because it wasn't driven by emotion, it was driven by structure. The deeper lesson here isn't about business success, it's about control. Most people try to control outcomes. Kamprad controlled the process. And when the process is controlled, the outcome becomes predictable. That's the difference between chance and certainty, between effort and leverage, between working hard and building something that works without you. By the time the world recognized what IKEA had become, the system was already too strong to dismantle. And Kamprad? Still thinking the same way, still optimizing, still refining. Because for him, success was never a destination. It was a structure. And once that structure exists, it doesn't stop. It continues, expands, adapts, even in your absence. That's the real power. Not money, not status, not recognition, but the ability to build something that doesn't depend on you. Because in the end, the people who understand systems don't just participate in the game, they define how it's played. And once you reach that level, you're no longer chasing success, you're controlling it. By the time Howard Schultz built Starbucks into a global brand, most people believed the story had reached its natural conclusion. From poverty to power, from uncertainty to control, from nothing to something that seemed permanent. On the surface, everything looked complete. Revenue was strong, expansion was aggressive, the brand was everywhere. Stores in major cities, stores in small towns, stores in places that had never even seen specialty coffee before. It was no longer just a company, it was an environment. And environments create a dangerous illusion that they are stable. But stability in business is rarely real. It's constructed, maintained, protected, and the moment you stop doing that, it starts to disappear. This is where most founders step back. They delegate, they trust the system to continue, and often, that's when the system begins to break. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but quietly. For Howard Schultz, the signs weren't obvious to everyone else because they weren't numerical. The reports still looked good. Growth curves were still rising. Operations were still expanding. But something intangible was changing. The experience. Customers were still coming, but they weren't staying. The atmosphere was shifting from something intentional to something mechanical. The stores were faster, more efficient, more standardized, but they felt different. And that difference is what Schultz noticed, because he understood something most executives ignore. You can optimize a system until you remove what made it valuable in the first place. Starbucks was never just about coffee. That's what people misunderstand. Coffee was the entry point, not the product. The real product was the environment, a place where people could slow down, sit, think, talk, a place that didn't feel transactional. But as the company scaled, pressure increased. More stores, more speed, more efficiency,